In other words, we need to be roughly 3 times our current size, 82 years from now. That may sound a bit shocking, but let me share a few facts. Today we have 37 million Canadians. If we stay on our current course, we'll have 55 million in 2100. Not nearly enough to ensure a thriving economy or to afford our compassionate social programs or build the infrastructure we need for livable communities.
The 21st will bring with it a huge amount of challenges for nations everywhere, from hurricanes, floods, droughts to new disease outbreaks. But if there is one issue more detrimental to nations everywhere, it is the mass aging of countries everywhere, from nations in Europe, Asia, South America, and North America and Africa as well, and countries everywhere are going to have to come up with unique sustainable solutions to the issues mass population aging brings, from lower tax revenues to lower GDP figures, leading to lower economic opportunities for the citizens of the nation. So what are countries doing to solve this issue? Well, in this video, we're gonna look at what Canada is doing to solve this issue by having 100 million people by 2100. Welcome to Raw Productions. Like, subscribe and comment now. Let's continue the video. Canada's population growth rate has been declining significantly for the past 60 years. In the 2 decades immediately following the Second World War, Canada experienced a significant baby boom, when the average fertility rate in Canada was 3.6 children per woman. In subsequent decades, however, the birth rate in Canada declined significantly. This decline in fertility was mostly due to the large increase in the participation of women in the Canadian labour force, but significant cultural and religious changes in Canadian society were also contributing factors. By 2008, Canada's fertility rate had dropped to about 1.6 children per woman. This graph shows that Canada's population growth rate is projected to decline gradually over the next few decades, driven mostly by further gradual declines in the fertility rate. But even if Canada's fertility rate were to rise modestly over the near future, there would still be a need to deal with the implications of the aging of the very large baby boom generation. No realistic increase in the future fertility rate can offset the effects of the aging baby boomers. Over the same post-war period, there has been a gradual increase in Canadians' life expectancy. In 1950, the average newborn Canadian child was expected to live for 71 years, while today that number is 81 years. This rising life expectancy has been due partly to an increase in healthier lifestyles and partly to improvements in medical and pharmaceutical technology. The rising life expectancy of Canadians plays a key role in driving the costs of the healthcare system, as per capita healthcare costs rise very significantly with age. With these 2 key demographic forces at play, it is inevitable that the average age of the Canadian population has been rising. A falling fertility rate implies that fewer young people are entering the population, and this effect alone tends to increase the average Canadian's age. Rising life expectancy implies that Canadians are growing older before they die, and this effect also tends to increase the average Canadian's age. As these 2 forces continue, they will drive Canada's population aging over the next several decades. But Canada is coming with unique solutions to the problem. Like several other developed countries, Canada will face 2 significant economic policy challenges in the coming decades. Both will be driven by a single force, the gradual but inexorable aging of the baby boomers, a group so much larger than any earlier or later generation that its aging dominates the trend in the age structure of the Canadian population. One projected effect from population aging is a decline in the labour force participation rate and thus a decline in the growth rate of material living standards. In particular, the average per capita income is projected to rise over the next 30 years at an annual rate roughly 1/2 the rate at which they increased over the past 40 years. This decline in the growth rate underlines the need for Canadians to think carefully about the way we can stimulate future productivity growth. A second projected effect relates to the fiscal position of Canadian governments. On the one hand, growth in government's tax base will slow due to the decline in labour force participation. At the same time, Population aging will create greater demands for healthcare expenditures and old age income support programs. Governments will be forced to make difficult fiscal decisions, involving restraints on expenditure growth, higher rates of taxation, or greater government borrowing. So what is Canada's unique solution to all these? More immigrants, which is called the Century Initiative by the Canadian government. The Century Initiative primarily wants to target economic immigrants, not just doctors and engineers but also caregivers, those with a skilled trade and entrepreneurs, a mix of people wanting to contribute to the economy and wanting to have children, as well as refugees. But how does the Canadian immigration process work? Canada's economic immigration process has been touted as a model for other countries. The largest share of economic immigrants come through federal high-skilled worker programs. Many apply through a point system that gives preference to younger candidates with job offers and high levels of education, experience, and language proficiency, that is, English and French. Every 2 weeks, the government invites top-ranking individuals to apply for permanent residency, an expensive and comprehensive process that includes language testing and biometric screening. Most applicants receive a decision within 6 months. The second largest economic immigration pathway is the provincial nominee program, which accounted for 1/3 of all economic immigrants in 2018. Through this process, as well as similar Quebec-specific programs, people apply to individual provinces, which choose candidates that fill their economic needs. The federal government must still approve provincially supported immigrants, but it grants the most permanent residency. Canada's provincial immigration approach has sparked interest in the United States, where regional programs could bolster growth in cities with dwindling populations. In 2014, Michigan asked the federal government to set aside 50,000 visas to attract high-skilled immigrants to Detroit. Though this has not happened, while the other is family-based immigration, this class of immigrants includes spouses, partners, and children joining family members already living in Canada. Under this program, legal permanent residents apply to sponsor their relatives, who must also apply for permanent residency. Canada recognizes same-sex couples for this immigration category, even if they are not legally married, although a couple must provide proof of a long-standing relationship, while the last one is for refugee and asylum seekers. And also, Canada overtook the United States as the world's top refugee location, in 2018, granting permanent residency to more than 28,000 displaced people, mostly from Africa and the Middle East. There are two main types of resettled refugees: government-assisted and privately sponsored. Government-assisted refugees are referred by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, based on their location and vulnerability, and receive government assistance during their transition. Privately sponsored refugees, which account for roughly 2/3 of resettled refugees, are brought to Canada by government-approved citizens and organizations that assume legal and financial responsibility for them. Refugees cannot apply directly to be resettled in Canada. All undergo rigorous screening by Canadian officials and generally have permanent resident status when they arrive. So in conclusion, with the world heading for demographic collapse, a lot of countries are going to be going through tough economic situations, low tax revenues, lower GDP figures, which means poorer citizens.